Cryptocurrencies were thought to be like the gold standard of being secure, having your information stay private, maybe if you don't want to use regular currency in transactions. It's changed. We have had such volatility over the years when it comes to what are called cryptocurrencies. Now, I get a lot of questions about cryptocurrencies. First of all, let me say I have never owned any cryptocurrencies, and I do not own any crypto assets at all. Most people look at cryptocurrencies and think of a couple of things. First of all, an investment. Well, an investment is something that you can use or sell, right? Typically, investments you don't really use. It's like a house. Is it an investment? Not so much. It's more of a liability. But people look at it and say, well, listen, it went from, what was it, 10,000 Bitcoins to buy a pizza to it went up to $50,000 per Bitcoin. It's a pretty big jump there. And yeah, it was pretty big. And of course, it's gone way down, and it's gone back up, and it's gone down, and it's gone back up. But the idea of any kind of currency is, can you do anything with the currency? So you can take a dollar bill and go and try and buy a cup of coffee. Okay, a $10 bill and buy a cup of coffee. In most places anyways. Well, that sounds like a good idea. I could probably use a cup of coffee right now. I've got a tickle in my throat. I hate that. But if you have something like Bitcoin, where can you spend it? You might remember Elon Musk was saying, yeah, you can use Bitcoin to buy a Tesla. Also, Wikipedia would accept donations via Bitcoin. There were a number of places online that you could use Bitcoin. In fact, there's a country right now in South Central America that has Bitcoin as its currency. That's kind of cool, too, when you think about it. What are you going to do? Latin American country, I'm trying to remember what it is. Oh, yeah, it's El Salvador. The first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as an official legal tender. Now, there's a number of reasons they're doing that, and he can do it. Basically, if you got a dictator, you can do almost anything you want to. So in El Salvador, they've got apps that you can use, and you can go and buy a street taco using Bitcoin, using their app. So there you go. If you have Bitcoin, you can go to El Salvador and you can buy all of the tacos and other basic stuff you might want to buy. But in general, no, you can't just go and take any of these cryptocurrencies and use them anywhere. So what good are they as a currency? We already established that they haven't been good as an investment unless you're paying a lot of attention and you're kind of every day buying and selling based on what the movement is. I know a guy that does exactly that. He's a day trader, basically, in some of these cryptocurrencies. Good for him. But in reality, is that something that makes sense in the long term? Is that going to help him long term? I don't know. I really don't, because again, there's no intrinsic value. So some of the cryptocurrencies have decided, well, let's have some sort of intrinsic value. And what they've done is they've created what are generally known as stable coins. And a stable coin is a type of cryptocurrency that behind it has the ability to be tied to something that's kind of stable. So, for instance, one that really hit the news recently is a stable coin that is tied to the US dollar. And yet, even though it is tied to the US dollar and the coin is a dollar and the dollar is a coin, they managed to get down into the few pennies worth of value, kind of like penny stock. So what good was that? It has since come back up. Some are tied to other types of assets. Some of them say, well, we have gold behind us, kind of like what the United States used to do back when we were on the gold standard and we became the petrodollar, where countries were using our currency, our US dollars, no matter which country it was, to buy and sell oil. Well, things have changed, obviously, and we're not going to talk about the whole petrodollar thing right now. So forget about that second benefit. Third benefit is, well, it's crypto, which means it's encrypted, which means we're safe from anybody spying on us, anybody stealing it. And of course, that's been proven to be false too. We've seen the cryptocurrencies stolen by the billions of dollars. We've seen these cryptocurrencies lost by the billions of dollars as well. That's pretty substantial when we get right down to it. Lost by the billions because people had them in their crypto wallets, lost the password for the crypto wallet, and all of a sudden now they are completely out of luck. Right? Does that make sense to you? So the basic idea behind currency is to make it easier to use a currency than to say, I'll trade you a chicken for 5 pounds of nails. Does that make sense to you? So you use a currency. So you say the chicken is worth $5. Well, actually, chicken is nowadays is about $30 if it's a laying hen. And those 5 pounds of nails are probably worth about $30. So we just exchange dollars back and forth. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that has driven up the value of cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin, has been criminal marketplaces. As you look at some of the stats of ransoms that are occurring, where people's computers are taken over via ransomware, and then that person then pays a ransom, and what happens when they pay that ransom? Well, they have to go find an exchange, pay US dollars to buy cryptocurrency, Bitcoin usually, and then they have the Bitcoin and they have to transfer to another wallet. Whether or not the bad guys can use the money is again a separate discussion. They certainly can, and they do, because some of these countries like Russia are going ahead and just exchanging the cryptocurrencies for rubles, which again kind of makes sense if you're Russia. Now, we have a lot of criminals that have been using the Bitcoin for ransoms. Businesses, publicly traded businesses, have been buying Bitcoin by the tens of millions of dollars so that they have it as an asset in case they get ransomed. Well, things have changed. There's a great article in NBC News by Kevin Collier. And Kevin's talking about this California man who was scammed out of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cryptocurrency. Now, this was a fake romance scam, which is a fairly common one. It tends to target older people who are lonely, and a romance starts online, and they go ahead and talk and kind of fall in love, right? And it turns out she or he has this really almost terminal disease. If only they had an extra $100,000 to pay for the surgery. You know the story, right? So he was conned out of the money. What's interesting to me is how the investigation and investigative ability has changed over the years. Probably about 5 years ago, I sat through a briefing by the Secret Service. And in that briefing, they explained how they had gone and quite cleverly tracked the money that was being sent to and used by this dark web operator who ran a site known as the Silk Road, and that site was selling illegal things online. Oh, and the currency that they were tracking was Bitcoin. Yes, indeed. So much for cryptocurrency being secure. 5 years ago, the Secret Service was able to do it, the FBI was able to do it, and they couldn't do a whole lot about it. But part of the problem is all of your transactions are a matter of public record. So if someone sends you a fraction of a Bitcoin, that is now in a ledger, and that ledger now can be used because when you then spend that fraction of a Bitcoin somewhere else, it can be tracked. Well, it is tracked. It's 100% guaranteed to be tracked. And once it's tracked, well, government can get in. Now, in this case, a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County, California, was able to track the movement of the cryptocurrency. Yeah. So this district attorney, deputy district attorney, not the FBI, not the Secret Service, not the National Security Agency, a local district attorney in Santa Clara County, California, not a particularly huge county, but she was able to track it. And she said that she thinks that the scammer lives in a country where they can't easily extradite them. And so they're unlikely to be arrested anytime soon. So that includes countries like Russia that do not extradite criminals to the United States. Now, getting into the details, there's a great quote from her in this NBC News article. Our bread and butter these days really is tracing cryptocurrency and trying to seize it and trying to get there faster than the bad guys are moving it elsewhere where we can't grab it. So she said the team tracked the victim's money as it bounced from one digital wallet to another till it ended up at a major cryptocurrency exchange where it appeared the scammer was planning to launder the money or cash out. They sent a warrant to the exchange, froze the money, and she plans to return it to the victim. That is a dramatic reversal from just a few years back when cryptocurrencies were seen as a boon for criminals. Amazing, isn't it? Well, stick around. We've got a lot more to talk about here. And, of course, sign up online, craigpeterson.com, and get my free newsletter. There have been a lot of efforts by many companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, to try and get rid of passwords. Well, how can you do that? What is a password, and what are these new technologies? Apple thinks they have the answer. Passwords have been kind of the bane of existence for a long while. And if you'd like, I have a special report on passwords, or I talk about password managers, things you can do, things you should do in order to help keep your information safe online, things like bank accounts, etc. Just email me, me@craigpeterson.com, and ask for the password special report, and I'll get it to you. Believe me, it's self-contained. It's not trying to get you to buy something, nothing. It is entirely about passwords and what you can do. Again, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com, and we'll get right back with you. Well, give us a couple of days. So passwords are a problem, and over the years, the standards for passwords have changed. I remember way back when some of the passwords might be 2, 3, 4 characters long. And back then, those were kind of hard to crack. And then Unix came along. I started using Unix, and when was that? Probably about 81. And as I was messing around with Unix, they had a couple of changes in how they did passwords. They added a salt to it. They used basically the same cipher that the Germans used in World War II, that Enigma cipher, which again was okay for the times. Today we have much more powerful ciphers, and the biggest concern right now amongst real cybersecurity people like government agencies is, okay, so what are we going to do when these new quantum computers come along with their artificial intelligence and other things? That's going to be a bit of a problem, because quantum computers are able to solve problems in fractions of a second even that traditional computers cannot solve. It's a whole different thing. I want you to think about something here. If you have a handful of spaghetti, now we're talking about hard spaghetti, not cooked spaghetti, and all dried out, and they are of varying lengths, how could you sort those into the smallest to largest, if you will? How could you find which ones were the longest, perhaps which ones were the shortest? Well, there's kind of an analog way of doing that, and there's a digital way of doing that. So the digital way for the computer would be to measure them all and compare the measurements and then identify how long the longest one was, and then maybe you'd have to go back and try and find that. So you can imagine that would take some time. The analog way of doing that, because there still are analog computers out there, and they do an amazing job in certain tasks, but the analog way of doing that is, okay, so you take that bundle of various length spaghetti and you slam it on the table. What's going to happen? Well, those pieces of dried spaghetti are going to self-align, right? The shortest ones are going to be down at the bottom, and the tallest ones are going to be sticking out from the top. So there you go. There's your tallest, your longest pieces of spaghetti, and it's done instantly. So that's just kind of an idea here. Quantum computing's not the same thing, but that's a comparison really of digital and analog computers. But it's the same type of thing. Some of these problems that would take thousands of years for a digital computer to work out can just take a fraction of a second. It's absolutely amazing. So when we're looking at today's algorithms, today's programs for encrypting things like military information, secret telegrams, if you will, going back and forth inside the Secretary of State's embassies worldwide, today they're considered to be quite secure. But with quantum computing, what's going to happen? So there are a lot of people out there right now who are working on trying to figure out how can we come up with an algorithm that works today with our digital computers and cannot be easily solved by quantum computers. We have a pretty good idea of how quantum computers are going to work in the future, how they kind of work right now, but this really gets us to the next level, which is kind of cool, frankly. That's a little bit here about cybersecurity. Well, how about you and your password? How does this all tie in? Well, there are a few standards out there that people have been trying to pass. It's no longer the 4-character password. You might remember it needs to be 8 to 10 characters, random mix of upper, lowercase, special digits, numbers, right? You remember those. And you should change it every 30 days. And those recommendations changed about 3 or 4 years ago when the National Institute of Standards and Technology said, hey, guys, passphrase is much better than what we've been doing because people are going to remember it and it can be longer. So if you are using, like I have some passphrases I use that are 30 characters or more long, and I mix up the case and I mix in some special characters and some numbers, but it's a phrase that I can remember. And I have different phrases for different websites because I use a password manager. Right now, I have about 3,100 entries in my password manager. That's a lot. And I bet you have a lot more passwords, or at least a lot more websites and accounts than you realize. And so that gets to be a real problem. Well, how do you make all of this work and make it easy for people? One of the ways that they're looking at using is something called the FIDO Alliance's technique. And the idea behind FIDO is actually similar to what I do right now because I use onepassword.com. I have an app on my phone, and the phone goes ahead and gives me the password. In fact, it'll put it in. I have plugins in my browsers. It'll put it right into the password form on the website. And then it'll ask me on my phone, hey, is that really you? And I'll say yes, using Duo. And ta-da, I'm logged in. It's really quite cool. Well, FIDO is a little different than that, but kind of the same. The whole idea behind FIDO is you register at a website, and the website will send a request to the FIDO app that's on your phone. So now on your phone, you'll use biometrics or maybe a one-time pass key, those 6-digit keys that change every 30 seconds. And so now you on your phone, you say, yeah, that's me, that's good, that's me, yeah, okay. And then the app will exchange with the website using public key cryptography, a public key. And it's going to be a unique public key for that website. So it'll generate a private key and a public key for that website. And now, ta-da, the website does not have your password and cannot get your password. And anytime you log in, it's going to ask you on your smartphone, is this you? And there's ways beyond smartphones. And if you want to find out more about passwords, I've got, again, that free special report, just craigpeterson.com. Just email me at craigpeterson.com, and I'll make sure we send that off to you, and it explains a lot about passwords and current technology. So FIDO is one way of doing this, and a few different companies have gone ahead and have invested some money into FIDO registration because it requires changes on the websites as well in order to work with FIDO. Now, you might use a PIN, you might use the biometrics, etc. But Apple has decided they've come up with something even better. Now, there's still a lot of questions about what Apple is doing, but they are rolling it into the next release of iOS and also of Mac operating system, and you'll be able to use that to securely log into websites. I think Apple's going to get a lot of traction on this, and I think it's going to be better for all of us involved here. We'll see. There's still a lot of unanswered questions, but I'll keep you up to date on this whole password technology. Stick around. There are ways for us to communicate nowadays, easy ways, but are the easy ways the best ways? Kind of the question here, frankly. And part of this answer has to do with WhatsApp. We'll talk right now. Many people have asked me about secure messaging. You probably know by now that sending text messages is not secure. In fact, it could be illegal if you have any personal information about patients or maybe employees. You just can't send those over open channels. So what Apple has done, for instance, is they've got their messaging app, and if the message is green, it's just reminding you that this is a text message. Now, they stuck with green because that was kind of the industry standard. Green does not mean safe in the Apple world when it comes to iMessage. Blue does. So they've got end-to-end encryption. So if the message is blue, that means the encryption's in place from side to side. On the other end of the spectrum, there are apps like Telegram, which are not particularly safe. Now, Telegram has pulled up its socks a little bit here, but in order to have end-to-end encryption in Telegram, you have to manually turn it on. It is not on by default. I also personally don't trust Telegram because of their background, things that they've done in the past. So, avoid that. WhatsApp is something I've been asked about. I had a family member of a service member who was overseas ask if WhatsApp was safe for them to communicate on because they didn't want third parties picking it up. Private messages, things you say and do online with friends and family are not necessarily things that are for public consumption. So the answer that I gave was, well, yeah, kind of. You might remember Facebook getting WhatsApp. They bought it and deciding they were going to make some changes to the privacy settings in WhatsApp. Now, that was really a big mistake. They said, we're going to add advertisements. Well, how are you going to effectively advertise if you don't know what we're talking about? Have you noticed advertising platforms? If you look up something, if someone else in your house looks up something, if your neighbors are looking up something, they assume that you might be interested in it as well. So what do? They go ahead and show you ads for that brand new pair of socks that you never really cared about. But because the algorithms in the background figured, well, yeah, that's what you've been talking about, well, let's sell you a pair of socks. So if Facebook is going to put ads into WhatsApp, what's going to happen? Are they going to be monitoring what you're saying and then sending you some of these messages, right? These ads. Because of that, a lot of people started looking for a more secure platform. And that's frankly where Moxie Marlinspike comes in. Kind of a fun name, a nom de plume in this case. But he started a company called Signal. He didn't just start it. He wrote the code for it, the server code, everything. And the whole idea behind Signal was to have a guaranteed safe, end-to-end way to communicate with a third party, with a friend, a relative, etc. So Signal is something that I've used in the past, and I use from time to time now as well, depending on who I'm talking to. And it does allow you to send messages. It does allow you to talk. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. So now there's an issue with Signal, and it's disappointing. Moxie has stepped down from running Signal. There's a company behind it in January 2022. And he said, the company's big enough, they can run themselves. He's still on the board of directors. And the guy who's currently the head of Signal is also a very privacy kind of focused guy, which is really good too. Signal, by the way, is free, and you can get it for pretty much any platform you would care to have it for. A very, very nice piece of software. I like what they've done. So now the problem is that some of those people at Signal have decided that they should have a way of making payments inside Signal. So a few months ago, they went ahead and added into Signal a piece of software that allows you to send payments online. Now, this is a little concerning. Let's talk about some of the reasons for the concern. Basically, what we're seeing is a cryptocurrency that Moxie himself helped to put in place. Now, I guess that's good because he understands it. It's supposedly a cryptocurrency that is privacy focused, and that's a good thing. Well, what type of crypto is it that's privacy focused, and how good is it going to be? Those are all good questions, but here's the biggest problem, I think, that comes from this. We've got our friends at Facebook, again, trying to add crypto payments to their various messenger and other products. We're seeing that from a lot of these communication systems because they can skim a little off the top legally, right? Charge you a fee and then make their money that way. But what happens when you put it into an encrypted messaging app? Well, bottom line, a lot of bad things can happen here because now all of a sudden you come under financial regulations, right? Because you are performing a financial function. So now, potentially here, there could be criminal misuse of the app because you could have ransomware and they say, reach us on Signal. Here's our Signal account and go ahead and send us crypto. It's called mobile coin, by the way, this particular cryptocurrency. So now all of a sudden you're opening up the possibility of all kinds of bad things happening, and your app Signal, which was originally great for messaging, now being used nefariously. I think that's a real problem. Now, when it comes to money transfer functions with cryptocurrencies, to say that they're anonymous, I think is 100% a misnomer. Because it's really pseudo-anonymous. It's never completely anonymous. So now you've increased the legal attack surface here. So now the various regulators in countries around the world can say, hey, this is no longer just a messaging app. You are using it to send money. We want to track all money transactions, right? And so what does that mean? Well, that means now we need to be able to break the encryption, or you need to shut down your app, or you need to stop the ability to send money. So the concern right now with Signal is we really could have some legal problems with Signal, and we could potentially cause some real-life harms. On the other side of this is what Moxie Marlinspike has been really driving with Signal over the years, which is we don't want anyone to be able to break into Signal. So there's particularly one Israeli-based company that sells tools that you can buy that allow you to break into smartphones. and they're used by everybody from criminals. You can even buy some of these things on eBay. And they're used also by law enforcement agencies. So he found that there is a bug in one of the libraries that's used by this Israeli software that causes it to crash. And so he put some code into Signal, at least he threatened to, that would cause any of the scanning software that tries to break in to your smartphone to fail, to crash. Yeah, kind of cool. Craig Peterson here online, craigpeterson.com, and really, you're not alone. I got some good news about ransomware and some bad news about BEC, business email compromise. In fact, I got a call just this week from someone who had, in fact, again, had their operating account emptied. Ransomware is a real problem, but it's interesting to watch it as it's evolved over the years. We're now seeing crackdowns driving down ransomware profits. Yes, indeed, ransomware's ROI is dropping, the return on investment. And so what we're starting to see is a drive towards more business email compromise attacks. So we'll talk about those, what those are. And I have a couple of clients now that became clients because of the business email compromises that happened to them. A great article that was in this week's newsletter. You should have received it Tuesday morning from me if you are signed up for the free newsletter, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. You'll get these usually Tuesday morning. It's my insider show notes, so you can kind of get up to speed on some of the articles I'm talking about during the week that I talk about on the radio and, of course, talk about here on the radio show and podcast and everything else as well. So what we're seeing here, according to Dark Readings editor Becky Bracken, is some major changes, a pivot by the bad guys. Because at the RSA conference, they're saying that law enforcement crackdowns, tighter cryptocurrency regulations, we've been talking about that today, and ransomware as a service operator shutdowns are driving the return on investment for ransomware operations across the world, all the way across the globe. So what is ransomware as a service? I think that's a good place to start because that has really been an albatross around our necks for a long time. The idea with ransomware is they get you to download some software, run some software that you really should not be running. That makes sense to you? So you get this software on your computer, it exfiltrates files. So in other words, it takes files that you have, sends them off to the bad guys, and then once it's done that, so it'll send like any Word files it finds, Excel, other files it might find interesting. Once it's done that, then it goes ahead and encrypts those files, so you no longer have access to them. And it doesn't just do them on your computer. If you share a drive, let's say you've got a G drive or something else on your computer that is being mounted from either another computer or maybe a server, it will go ahead and do the same thing with those files. And remember, it isn't just encrypting, because if you have a good backup, and by the way, most businesses that I've come into do not have a good backup, which is a real problem because their backups fail. They haven't run. I had one case where we helped a business out, and it had been a year and a half since they had a successful backup, and they had no idea. They were dutifully carrying home these USB drives every day, plugging a new one in, and the backups were not running. Absolutely amazing. So anyhow, Ransomware as a service, then, so they've encrypted your files, they've exfiltrated, in other words, they've taken your files, and then they demand a ransom. So usually it's like this red screen that comes up and says, hey, all your files belong to us, and you need to contact us. So they have people who help you buy Bitcoin or whatever they're looking for. Usually it's Bitcoin, and send the Bitcoin to them. And then they'll give you what's hopefully a decryption key. Now, what's particularly interesting about these decryption keys is they work about half of the time. So in other words, about half of the time you'll get all your data back, about half the time you will not. It's just not good. So if you're a small operator, if you are just a small bad guy, and it's you and maybe somebody else helping you, you got your nephew there helping you out, how are you going to help these people that you're ransoming buy the cryptocurrency? How are you going to threaten them with release of their documents online unless you have a staff of people to really help you out here? Well, that's where ransomware as a service comes in. The whole idea behind RAS is you can just be a one-man shop, and all you have to do is get someone to open this file. So you go ahead and register with the ransomware as a service provider, and they give you the software, and you embed your little key in there so they know it's you. And then you send it off in an email. You might try and mess with those people to get them to do something they shouldn't do. And that's all you have to do. Because once somebody opens up that file that you sent them, it's in the hands of these service guys, ransomware as a service guys. So these ransomware as a service people will do all of the tech support. They'll help people buy the Bitcoin. They'll help them pay the ransom. They'll help them recover files, to a certain extent, right? Does this make sense to you? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Now, I want to offer you, I've got this document about the new rules for backup. And again, it's free. You can get it, no problem. Just go ahead and email me, me@craigpeterson.com, me@craigpeterson.com, because the backups are so important. And just like password rules have changed, the rules have changed for backups as well. So just drop me an email, me@craigpeterson.com, and ask for it, and we'll make sure we send it off to you. And it's not trying to sell you more stuff, okay? It really is explaining the whole thing for you. I'm not holding anything back. Well, it's these ransomware as a service operators then get the payment from you and then pay a percentage anywhere from 80% to 50%, sometimes even lower, to the person who ransomed you. Isn't that just wonderful? So our law enforcement people, as well as in other countries, have been going after the ransomware as a service providers, because if they can shut down these RAS guys, just shutting one of them down can shut down thousands of small ransomware people. Isn't that cool? Works really, really well. So they have been shut down. Many of them. There's one that just popped its head back up again after about 6 months. We'll see how far they get. But it is a very big blow to the whole industry. Ransomware really, because of these as a service operators, has become a centralized business. So there's a small number of operators responsible for the majority of these thousands, hundreds of thousands of attacks, really. It's probably worse than that. So a couple of just big groups are left, the Conti Group and Lockbit. And they've got more than 50% of the share of ransomware attacks in the first half of 2022. But now they're going after them, the feds. And I think that makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because who do you go for? Well, you go for the people who are causing the most harm, and that's certainly them. So I expect they'll be shut down sometime soon, too. So ransomware had its moment over the last couple of years. Still a lot of ransomware out there, still a lot of problems. But now we're seeing BEC, business email compromise tactics. And I did a a television appearance where I was working with the newsmaker or whatever they call them, right? Talking heads on that TV show and explaining what was happening. And the most standard tactic right now is the gift card swindle. I should put together a little video on this one. But it's all about tricking employees into buying bogus gift cards. So this good old-fashioned grift is still working. And what happened in our case is it was actually one of the newscasters who got an email supposedly from someone else saying, hey, we want to celebrate everybody. And in order to do that, I want to give them all gift cards. So can you go out and buy gift cards? And so we messed around with them. It was really kind of fun. And said, okay, what denomination? How many do you think we need? Who do you think we should give them to? And of course, we knew what we were doing. Their English grammar was not very good. And it was really obvious that this was not the person they were pretending to be. So that happens, and it happens a lot. They got into a business email account, the email account of that newscaster. So they were able to go through their email, figure out who else was in the business, who was a trusted source inside of the business, so they could pretend that they were that newscaster and send emails to this trusted source. And today, these business email compromise attacks are aimed at the financial supply chain. And once these threat actors are inside, they look for opportunities to spoof vendor emails to send payments to controlled accounts. And the worst case I know of this is a company that sent $45 million to a scammer. And what happened here is this woman pretended to be the CEO who was out of the country at the time and got the CFO to wire the money to her. Interesting story. We'll have to tell it to you sometime. But it's a real problem. And we just had another one. We've had them in school districts. Look them up online. Do a DuckDuckGo search for them. And you'll find them right, left, and center. Because social engineering works. And frankly, business email compromise is a clear threat to businesses everywhere. As I mentioned, we had one, listens to the show, contact us just last week again. $40,000 taken out of the operating account. We had another one that had, I think it was $120,000 taken out of the operating account. And another one that had about $80,000 taken out of the operating account. Yeah, make sure you're on my newsletter. Even the free one, I do weekly free trainings. CraigPeterson.com. Make sure you subscribe now. Facebook's about 18 years old, coming on 20. Facebook has a lot of data. How much stuff have you given Facebook? Did you fall victim for that? Hey, upload your contacts, we'll find your friends. Well, they don't know where your data is. There's an article that had appeared online from our friends over at, I think it was, let me see here. Motherboard. I was right. And Motherboard's reporting that Facebook doesn't know what it does with your data or where it goes. Now, there's always a lot of rumors about different companies, and particularly when they're a big company and the news headlines are kind of grabbing your attention. And certainly Facebook can be one of those companies. So where did Motherboard get this opinion about Facebook just being completely clueless about your personal data? Well, it came from a leaked document. Yeah, exactly. So we find out a lot of stuff like that, right? I used to follow a website about companies that were going to go under, and they posted internal memos. They basically got sued out of existence. But there's no way that Facebook is going to be able to sue this one out of existence, because they are describing this as internally as a tsunami of privacy regulations all over the world. So, of course, if you're older, we used to call those tidal waves, but think of what the implication there is of a tsunami coming in and just overwhelming everything. So Facebook internally, their engineers are trying to figure out, okay, so how do we deal with people's personal data? It's not categorized in ways that regulators want to control it. Now, there's a huge problem right there. You've got third-party data, you've got first-party data, you've got sensitive categories data. They might know what religion you are, what your persuasions are in various different ways. There's a lot of things they might know about you. How are they all categorized? Now, we've got the European Union with their General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. We talked about when it came into effect back in 2018, and I've helped a few companies to comply with that. That's not my specialty. My specialty is the cybersecurity side. But in Article 5, this European law mandates that personal data must be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes and not further processed in a manner that is incompatible with those purposes. So what that means is that every piece of data, like where you are using Facebook or your religious orientation, can only be collected and used for a specific purpose and not reused for another purpose. So, as an example here that Vice is giving, in past, Facebook took the phone number that users provided to protect their accounts with two-factor authentication and fed it to its People You Know feature, as well as to advertisers. Yeah, interesting, eh? So Gizmodo, with the help of academic researchers, caught Facebook doing this, and eventually the company had to stop the practice. And this goes back to the earlier days where Facebook would say, hey, find out if your friends are on Facebook. Upload your contacts right now. And most people did. Right? What did you know back then about trying to keep your data private, to try and stop the proliferation of information about you online? Nothing, right? I think I probably even uploaded it back then, thinking, well, that'd be nice to see if I got friends here. We can start chatting, etc. Well, according to legal experts that were interviewed by Motherboard, who wrote this article and has a copy of the internal memo, this European regulation specifically prohibits that kind of repurposing of your phone number, of trying to put together the social graph. And the leaked document shows that Facebook may not even have the ability to limit how it handles users' data. Now, I was on a number of radio stations this week talking about this, and the example I gave is just look at an average business from the time it starts. You know, Facebook started how, right? Well, they scraping pictures of young women off of Harvard University's main catalog, right? A contact page. And then asking people, well, what do you think of this? Rate this person, rate that person. And off they go, right? Trying to rate them. Yeah. All that matters to a woman, at least according to Mark Zuckerberg, or all that matters about a woman is how she looks, right? Do I think she's pretty or not? Ridiculous what he was doing. It's just, that's Zuckerberg, right? That's who he is. Not a great guy. Anyways, so you go from stealing pictures of young ladies, asking people to rate them, putting together some class information and stuff there at Harvard, and then moving on to other universities and then opening it up even wider and wider. And of course, that also created demand because you can't get on if you're not at one of the universities that we have set it up for. And then you continue to grow. You're adding these universities, you're starting to collect data, and you're making more money than God. So what do? Well, you don't have to worry about inefficiencies, I'll tell you that. right? One thing you don't have to do is worry about, we've got a lot of redundant work going on here. We've got a lot of teams working on basically the same thing. No, you've got more money than you can possibly shake a stick at. So now you go ahead and send that money to this group or that group, and they put together all of the basic information, right, that they want. They are pulling it out of this database and that database, and they're doing some correlation, writing some really cool SQL queries with incredible joins and everything else, right? And now that becomes part of the main code for Facebook. And then Facebook goes on to the next little project. And they do the same thing. Then the next project, then the next project. And then someone comes along and says, hey, we want this feature or that feature for our advertisers. And then in that goes. And then along comes candidate Obama. And one of the groups inside Facebook says, yeah, here we go. Here's all of the information we have about everybody, and it's free. Don't worry about it, right? And then when Trump actually bought it and hired a company to try and process some of that information, he got in trouble. No. But the whole campaign could get access to anything they wanted to. Again, because the data wasn't controlled. They had no idea who was doing what with the data. And according to this internal memo, they still don't know. They don't even know if they can possibly comply with these regulations, not just in Europe, but we have regulations in pretty much all of the 50 states in the U.S. Canada, of course, has their own, Australia, New Zealand. Think about all the places Facebook makes a lot of money. So here's a quote from that. We build systems with open borders. The result of these open systems and open culture is well described with an analogy. Imagine you hold a bottle of ink in your hand. The bottle of ink is a mixture of all kinds of user data. You pour that ink into a lake of water, okay, and it flows everywhere. The document read, right? So how do you put that ink back in the bottle, in the right bottle? How do you organize it again so that it only flows to the allowed places in the lake? They're totally right about that. Where did they collect it from? Apparently, they don't even know where they got some of this information, this data from. Kind of reminds me of the no-fly list, right? You don't know you're on it and you can't get yourself off of it, right? It's kind of crazy. So this document that we're talking about was written last year by Facebook privacy engineers on the ad and business product team, whose mission is to make meaningful connections between people and businesses, and which, quote, sits at the center of our monetization strategy and is the engine that powers Facebook's growth. Interesting problems. And I see this being a problem well into the future for more and more of these companies. Look at Twitter as an example that we've all heard about a lot lately, and I've talked about as well. Along comes Elon Musk and he says, well, wait a minute now. I can make Twitter way more profitable. We're going to get rid of however many people, it's well over 1,000, and then we are going to hire more people. We're going to start charging. We're going to be more efficient. You can bet all of these redundancies that are in Facebook are also there in Twitter. And Twitter also has to comply with all of these regulations that Facebook is kind of freaking out about, for really a very good reason. So this document is available to anybody who wants to look at it. I'm looking at it right now, talking about regulatory landscape and the fundamental problems of Facebook's data lake. And this is a problem that most companies have. Not as bad as Facebook does, but most companies, right, you grow. I have yet to walk into a business that needs help with cybersecurity and find everything in place as it should be. Because it grew organically, right? You started out with a little consumer firewall router and Wi-Fi. and then you added to it and you put a switch here and you added another switch behind that and moved things around. Apparently, looting is one of the benefits of being a Russian soldier. And according to the reports coming out of Ukraine, they've been doing it a lot. But there's a tech angle on here that is really turning the tables on these Russian looters. Thanks for being with me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm honored, frankly, to be in front of this microphone. This is really something. You know, we know in wars there are people that loot, and typically the various militaries try and make sure, at least recently, that looting is kept to an absolute minimum. Certainly the Americans, the British, even the Nazis during World War II, the socialists there in Germany, they tried to stop some of the looting that was going on. I think that's probably a very good thing, right? Because what you end up with is just all of these locals that are just totally upset with you. I found a great article on The Guardian. And there's a village that had been occupied for about a month by Russian troops. And the people came back. They are just shocked to see what happened. They're giving a few examples of different towns. They found that alcohol was stolen and they left empty bottles behind, food wrappers, cigarette butts thrown all over the place in apartments and homes, piles of feces blocking the toilets, family photographs torn, thrown around the house. They took away all of the clothes. This is a quote from one of the people, literally everything, male and female coats, boots, shirts, jackets, even my dresses, and lingerie. This is really, really something. The Soviets didn't do this, but now Russian military apparently does. So over the past couple of weeks, there have been reporting from numerous places where Russian troops had occupied Ukrainian territory. And The Guardian, which is this UK newspaper, collected evidence that suggests looting by Russian forces was not merely a case of a few wayward soldiers, but a systematic part of Russian military behavior across multiple towns and villages. That's absolutely amazing. Another quote here. People saw the Russian soldiers loading everything onto Ural trucks, everything they could get their hands on. A dozen houses on the village's main street had been looted, as well as the shops. Other villagers reported losing washing machines, food, laptops, even a sofa, air conditioners, being shipped back. Just like, you might use UPS here. They have their equivalent over there. A lady here who was the head teacher in the school, she came back in, of course, found her home looted. And in the head teacher's office, she found an open pair of scissors that had been jammed into a plasma screen that was left behind. Because if they can't steal it, they're going to destroy it. They don't leave anything behind. They found the Russians had taken most of the computers, the projectors, and other electronic equipment. It's incredible. So let's talk about the turnaround here a little bit. You might have heard stories about some of these bad guys that have smashed and grabbed their way into Apple stores. So they get into the Apple store, they grab laptops on iPads, no longer iPods because they don't make those anymore, and iPhones. And they take them and they run with them. Well, nowadays, there's not a whole lot of use for those. Now, what they have been doing, some of these bad guys, is they take some parts and use them in stolen equipment. They sell them on the used market, etc. But when you're talking about something specific, like an iPhone, that needs specific activation, completely different problem arises for these guys. Because that iPhone needs to have a SIM card in order to get onto the cell network, and it also has built-in serial numbers. So what happens in those cases? Well, Apple goes ahead and disables them. So as soon as they connect to the internet, let's say they put them on Wi-Fi, they don't get a SIM card, they don't buy service from T-Mobile or Verizon or whoever it might be. So now they disconnect to the Wi-Fi and it calls home because it's going to get updates. I want to download stuff from the App Store and they find that it's been bricked. Now you can do that with a lot of mobile device managers that are available for all kinds of equipment nowadays, but certainly Apple equipment, where if a phone is lost or stolen or a laptop or other pieces of equipment, you can get on the MDM and disable it, have it remotely erase, etc. Now, police have had some interesting problems with that because a bad guy might go ahead and erase a smartphone that's in the evidence locker at the police station. So they're doing things like putting them into Faraday cages or static bags or other things to try and stop that. So I think we've established here that the higher tech equipment is pretty well protected. You steal it, it's not going to do you much good. So one of the things the Russians stole when they were in, it's called, I think you pronounce it Melitopol, which is, again, a Ukrainian city, is they stole all of the equipment from a farm equipment dealership and shipped it to Chechnya. Now, that's according to a source in a businessman in the area that CNN is reporting on. So they shipped this equipment. We're talking about combines, harvesters worth $300,000 a piece. They shipped it 700 miles. And the thieves were ultimately unable to use the equipment because it had been locked remotely. So think about agriculture equipment. John Deere in this case. These pieces of equipment, they drive themselves. It's autonomous. It goes up and down the fields. It goes any pattern that you want to. It'll bring itself within a foot or an inch of your boundaries, right, of your property, being very, very efficient the whole time, whether it's planting or harvesting, etc. And that's just a phenomenal thing because it saves so much time for the farmer, makes it easier to do. The companies like John Deere want to sell as many pieces of this equipment as they possibly can. And farming is known to be a, not terribly profitable business. It certainly isn't like Facebook. So how can they get this expensive equipment into the hands of a lot of farmers? Well, what they do is they lease it. So you can lease the equipment through a leasing company or maybe directly from the manufacturer, and now you're off and running. But what happens if the lease isn't paid? Now, it's one thing if you don't pay your lease on a $2,000 laptop, right? They're probably not going to come hunting for you. But when you're talking about a $300,000 harvester, they're more interested. So the leasing company has title to the equipment, and the leasing company can shut it off remotely, right? You see where I'm going with this? So that they can get their equipment in the hands of more farmers, because the farmers can lease it. It costs them less. They don't have to have a big cash payment, right? You see how this all works. So when the Russian forces stole this equipment that's valued, total value here is about $5 million, they were able to shut it all off. And obviously, if you can't start the engine because it's all shut off and it's all run by computers nowadays, and, there's pros and cons to that. I think there's a lot of cons. But what are you going to do? How's that going to work for you? Well, it isn't going to work for you. And they were able to track it. It had GPS trackers, find out exactly where it was. That's how they know it was taken to Chechnya and could be controlled remotely. And in this case, how'd they control it? Well, they completely shut it off. Even if they sell the harvesters for spare parts, they'll earn some money, but they sure aren't going to be able to sell them for the $300,000 that they were actually worth. Hey, stick around. We'll be right back, and visit me online at craigpeterson.com. If you sign up there, you'll be able to get my insider show notes, and every week I have a quick 5-minute training right there in your emails. craigpeterson.com. That's S-O-N, in case you're wondering. If you've been worried about ransomware, you are right to worry. It's up, it's costly, and we're going to talk about that right now. What are the stats? What can you do? What happens if you do get hacked? Interesting world. Ransomware has been a very long-running problem. I remember a client of ours, a car dealership, who we had gone in, we had improved all of their systems and their security, and one of their people, who was actually a senior manager, ended up downloading a piece of ransomware, one of these encrypted ones, and opened it up, and his machine, all of a sudden, ta-da, guess what? It had ransomware on it. One of those big red screens that say pay up. Send us this much Bitcoin and here's our address, right? All of that sort of stuff. And he called us up and said, what's going on here? What happened? Well, first of all, don't bring your own machine into the office. Secondly, don't open up particularly encrypted files using a password that they gave you. And thirdly, we stopped it automatically. It did not spread. We were able to completely restore his computer. Now, let's consider here at the consequences of what happened. So he obviously was scared. And within a matter of a couple of hours, we actually had him back to where he was, and it didn't spread. So the consequences there, they weren't that bad. But how about if it had gotten worse? How about if the ransomware also, before it started holding his computer ransom, went out and found all of the data about their customers, right? Do you think an auto dealership would love to hear that all of their customer data was stolen and released, all of the personal data of all of their customers, right? Obviously not. So there's a potential cost there. And then how long do you think it would take a normal company that thinks they have backups to get back online? Well, I can tell you it'll take quite a while because the biggest problem is most backups don't work. We have yet to go into a business that was actually doing backups that would work to help restore them. And if you're interested, I can send you, I've got something I wrote up, be glad to email it back to you. Obviously, as usual, no charge, right? And you'll be able to go into that and figure out what you should do, because I break it down into the different types of backups and why you might want to use them or why you might not want to use them. But ransomware is a kind of a pernicious, nasty little thing, particularly nowadays, because it's two-factor, right? First is they've encrypted your data, you can't get to it. And then the second side of that is, okay, well, I can't get to my data, and now they're threatening to hold my data ransom or they'll release it. So they'll put it out there. And of course, if you're in a regulated industry, which actually car dealers are because they deal with financial transactions, leases, loans, that sort of thing, you can lose your license for your business. You can lose your ability to go ahead and, frankly, make loans and work with financial companies and financial instruments. It could be a very, very big deal. So there are a lot of potential things that can happen, all the way from losing your reputation as a business or an individual, losing all of the money in your operating account. And we've got a client that we picked up afterwards that, yes, indeed, they lost all of the money in their operating account. And then how do you make payroll? How do you do things? Well, there's a new study that came out from Check Point. Check Point is one of the original firewall companies, and they had a look at ransomware. What are the costs of ransomware? Now, bottom line, I'm looking at some stats here on a couple of different sites. One is, by the way, Conti, which is a big ransomware gang that also got hacked after they said we are going to attack anyone that doesn't defend Vlad's invasion of Ukraine, and then they got hacked and their information was released. But here's the ransomware statistics. This is from CloudWords. First of all, the largest ransom demand is $50 million, and that was in 2021 to Acer, big computer company. 37% of businesses were hit by ransomware in 2021. This is amazing. They're expecting by 2031, so in about a decade, ransomware is going to be costing about $265 billion a year. Now, on average, ransomware costs businesses $1.85 million to recover from an attack. Now, that's obviously not a one or two person place, but think of the car dealer again. How much money are they going to make over the year or over the life of the business, right? If you're a car dealer, you have a license to print money, right? You're selling car model or cars from manufacturer X. And now you have the right to do that, and they can remove that right. How many tens, hundreds of millions of dollars might that end up costing you? Yeah, big deal. Total cost of ransomware last year, $20 billion. Now, these are the interesting statistics here right now, so pay closer attention to this. 32% of ransomware victims paid a ransom demand. So about a third paid a ransom demand last year. It's actually down because my recollection is it used to be about 50% would pay a ransom. Now, on average, that one-third of victims that paid a ransom only recovered 65% of their data. Now, that differs from a number I've been using from the FBI that's a little bit older that was saying it's a little better than 50%. But 65% of paying victims recovered their data. Now, isn't that absolutely amazing? Now, 57% of companies are able to recover their data using a cloud backup. Now, think about the different types of backup. Cloud backup is something that can work pretty well if you're a home user. But how long did it take for your system to get backed up? Probably took weeks, right? For a regular computer over a regular internet line. Now, restoring from backup is going to be faster because your downlink is usually faster than your uplink. That's not true for businesses that have real internet service like ours. It's the same bandwidth up as it is down. But it can take, again, days or weeks to try and recover your machine. So it's very, very expensive, and I wish I had more time to go into this. But looking at the costs here and the fact that insurance companies are no longer paying out for a lot of these ransomware attacks, it could be incredibly expensive for you. Incredibly. So here you go. The number one business types by industry for ransomware attacks: retail. That makes sense, doesn't it? Real estate, electrical contractors, law firms, and wholesale building materials. Isn't that interesting? And that's probably because none of these people are really aware or conscious of doing what? Of keeping their data secure, of having a good IT team, a good IT department. So there's your bottom line. Those are the guys that are getting hit the most. The numbers are increasing dramatically, and your costs are not just in the money you might pay as a ransom. And so as it turns out, in pretty much every case, prevention is less expensive and much better than the cure of trying to pay ransom or trying to restore from backups. Hey, you're listening to Craig Peterson. You can get my weekly show notes by just going to craigpeterson.com, and I'll also send you my special report on how to do passwords. Stick around, we'll be right back. You and I have talked about passwords before, the way to generate them, and how important they are. We'll go over that again a little bit in just a second, but there's a new standard out there that will eliminate the need for passwords. I remember, I think the only system I've ever really used that did not require passwords was the IBM 360. Yeah, 360, you punch up the cards, all of the JCL, you feed it the card deck in, and off it goes and does its little thing. That was a different day, a different era. When I started in college, in university, we had remote systems, timeshare systems that we could log into, and there weren't much in the line of password requirements then. But you had a username, you had a simple password, and I remember one of our instructors, his name was Robert Andrew Lang, and his password was always some sort of a combination of R.A. Lang. So it was always easy to guess what his password was. Today, it has gotten a lot worse. Today, we have devices with us all of the time. You might be wearing a smart watch that requires a password. You, of course, probably have a smartphone that's also maybe requiring a password, certainly after it boots. Nowadays, they use fingerprints or facial recognition, which is handy but has its own drawbacks. But how about the websites you're going to, the systems you're using when you're at work and logging in? They all require passwords and usernames of some sort or another. Well, Apple, Google, and Microsoft have all committed to expanding their support for a standard that's actually been out there for a few years. It's called the FIDO standard. And the idea behind this is that you don't have to have a password in order to log in. Now, that's really kind of an interesting thing, right? Just looking at it, because we're so used to having this password-only authentication. And of course, the thing to do there is make sure you have, for your password, multiple words in the password. It should really be a passphrase. And between the words, put in special characters or numbers. Maybe mix upper lowercase a little bit in those words. Those are the best passwords, 20 characters, 30 characters long. And then if you have to have a PIN, I typically use a 12-digit PIN. And how do I remember all of these? Because I use a completely different password for every website. And right now, let me pull it up. I'm using 1password.com's password manager. And my main password for that is about 25 characters long. And I have 3,135 entries here in my password manager. 3,100. That is a whole lot of passwords, right? As well as software licenses and a few other things in there. That's how I remember them, is using a password manager. 1password.com is my favorite. Now, obviously, I don't make any money by referring you there. I really do like that. Some others that I've liked in the past include LastPass, but they really messed up with some of their cybersecurity last year, and I lost my faith in it. So now what they're trying to do is make these websites that we go to, as well as some apps, to have a consistent, secure, and passwordless sign-in. And they're going to make it available to consumers across all kinds of devices and platforms. That's why you've got Apple, Google, and Microsoft all committing to it. And you can bet everybody else is going to follow along, because there's hundreds of other companies that have decided they're going to work with the FIDO Alliance. And they're going to create this passwordless future, which I like this idea. So how does this work? Well, basically, you need to have a smartphone. I'm just going to go with the most standard way that this is going to work here in the future. And you can then have a pass key. This is kind of like a multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. So, for instance, right now, when I sign into a website online, I'm giving a username, I'm giving a password, and then it comes up and it asks me for a code. So I enter in a 6-digit code, and that code changes every 30 seconds. And again, I use my password manager from 1password.com in order to generate that code. So that's how I log into Microsoft sites and Google sites and all kinds of sites out there. So it's kind of a similar thing here. Now, for the sites for my company, because we do cybersecurity for businesses, including regulated businesses, we have biometrics tied in as well. So to log into our systems, I have to have a username, I have to have a password. I then am sent to a single sign-on page where I have to have a message sent to my smart device that then has a special app that uses biometrics, either a Face ID or a fingerprint, to verify who I am. So yeah, there's a lot there, but I have to protect my customers' data, something that very, very few, it's crazy, actual so-called managed security services providers do. But it's important, right? By the way, if you want my password special report, just go to craigpeterson.com, sign up for my email list. I'll send that to you. That's what we're sending out right now for anyone who signs up new at craigpeterson.com. And if you'd like a copy of it and you're already on the list, just go ahead and email me, M-E, at craigpeterson.com, and ask for the password special report where I go through a lot of this sort of thing. So what will happen with this is you go to a website and it might come up with a QR code. So you then scan that QR code with your phone and verify it, authorize it on your phone. You might, again, have it set up so that your phone requires facial recognition, or perhaps it'll require a fingerprint. And now you are in, which is very cool. They fixed some security problems in FIDO over the last few years, which is great. Over the coming year, you're going to see this available on Apple devices, Google, Microsoft platforms. And it really is simple, stronger authentication. That's what FIDO calls it, right? But it is going to make your life a lot easier. It is a standard, and the passwordless future makes a whole lot of sense for all of us. Now, I want to talk about another thing here that has bothered me for a long time. I have a sister-in-law who is in the medical field and gives prescriptions, a doctor's thing. And I think she's not quite a doctor. I can't remember what she has. She's an LPN or something. Anyhow, so she will get on a Zoom call with someone, and they'll go through medical history and what's happening right now, and she'll make prescriptions. And so I warned her about that, saying, it is very bad to be using Zoom, because Zoom is not secure, never has been, probably never will be, right? If you want secure, you have to go and pay for it from one of these providers like WebEx. That's what we use. We have a version of WebEx that is set up to be secure. So I talked to her about that and said, hey, listen, you can't do this. You've really got to go another way here. And so she started using one of these mental or medical health apps. What I want to talk about right now specifically are some checks that were just performed, some audits on mental health apps. That's why I messed up a second ago. But what they looked at is that things are a serious, serious problem there. And in fact, the threat post is calling it creepy, frankly, just plain old creepy. So they've got some good intentions. They want to help with mental health. You've probably seen these, or at least heard them advertised, so you can get on the horn with a mental health professional, a doctor or otherwise, in order to help you here with your psychological or spiritual well-being. And people are sharing their personal and sensitive data with third parties. And of 32 mental health and prayer mobile apps that were investigated by the open source organization, 28 of the 32 were found to be inherently insecure and were given a privacy not included label, including others here. So this is a report that was released here by the open source organization, tied into Mozilla. Mozilla, those are the Firefox people. They have what they call their minimum security standards. So things like requiring strong passwords, managing security updates and vulnerabilities, etc. 25 of the 32 failed to meet even those minimum security standards. So these apps are dealing with some of the most sensitive mental health and wellness issues people can possibly have, right? Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, domestic violence, eating disorders. And they are being just terrible with your security. Mozilla researchers spent 255 hours or about 8 hours per product peering under the hood of the security, watching the data that was going back and forth, right, between all of these mental health and prayer apps. It was just crazy. So, for example, 8 of the apps reviewed allowed weak passwords that range from digit 1 as the password to 1111, while a mental health app called MoodFit only required 1 letter or digit as a password. Now, that is very concerning for an app that collects mood and symptom data. So be very careful. 2 of the apps, BetterHelp, a popular app that connects users with therapists, and Better Stop Suicide, which is, of course, a suicide prevention app, have vague and messy, according to Mozilla, privacy policies that have little or no effect on actual user data protection. So be very, very careful. And if you're a mental health professional or a medical professional, don't just go and use these open video calls, etc., etc. Find something good, and there are some standards out there. Again, visit me online, get my insider show notes every week, get my little mini trainings. They come out most weeks. Just go to craigpeterson.com, and I'll send you my special report on passwords and more.